Amen. Well, it's a great privilege and honour to share with you guys this morning. We don't take speaking opportunities for granted. They're not always easy to get, especially on a topic like this. It's a topic so controversial. It's a topic so deeply ingrained in many people's minds and hearts in Northern Ireland. Everybody knows about it, and that topic is abortion. Not many people want to touch it. It's affected many people in this land. You will probably know of people who have been affected, perhaps in your own family, maybe even yourself to a degree. I don't know. But abortion affects many, many people. And the burden is for the Christian church to rise up and to be an active voice on behalf of unborn children. And that's what we're all about. I'll say this. I want to read a scripture which has really just been the basis and just the move of what we're trying to accomplish. But by God's grace, we can change the world. I don't say that lightly. It's not one of those airy-fairy things that you would just say and everyone claps and cheers, and that's a brilliant thing to say. But we can change the world. And why say that? Because the world needs changed. The world needs changed. We can make a difference. And I don't know any of you here today. Many people have been really humbled by the response and the hospitality and the bacon. I've been really humbled by just the greeting that we've received this morning. And we're all on different parts of the road, aren't we? We're all in different. We've all got different experience behind us. We all have different skills to bring to the table. But God can use us to make a difference. And He can use us now. He can use us today. So I want to read a scripture, which has really been the basis of what I'm trying to bring out. And I'm going to read the scripture, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the issue, and then I'm going to read the scripture again, perhaps then with a bit of context to see. Because this is the sort of scripture that you could put on a bookmark, and you would maybe give out at the Sunday schools and the camps and say, well, that's a great encouraging verse, and maybe God will move in such ways. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58. Therefore, my beloved brothers, let's throw sisters in there. My beloved brothers and sisters, be steadfast, be immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labour is not in vain. Let me read that again. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, be immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labour is not in vain. Let me follow it up with a quote by a Zambian pastor called Nevers Mumba. No one knows him, I would probably guess. But he says this: I believe we have come to a place where the thinking of the Christians must change. I am not interested in following a religion that does not impact the world in which we live. Jesus was a rebel, and He has called us to join this rebel movement and change the world together. And we're talking about rebellion, not in terms of taking up arms or violence. We're talking about rebellion in terms of going against the flow of what this world is saying is knowledge, of what this world is saying is the thing to do, is what this world is claiming to be the right thing. Yeah. So I want to share with you our vision this morning for We Shall Not Be Silent. That's the ministry that we're involved with. We shall not be silent. I'll explain why it's called that in a minute. Self-evident why it's called that on the issue of abortion. For those who don't know me, and that's many, maybe I've conversed with Richard a bit over Facebook. My name's Steve Brown, 32 years of age. I've got 4 kids. I'm recording this, so my wife's going to hear that. I have 4 kids, to the best of my 4 kids. Ben, Zach, Noah and Grace, all under the age of 6 years. So it's quite intense at home. My wife's name is Tracy. And we head up a ministry called the Way Forward Ministries. It's not an international multi-million-pound ministry. It's just something we believe that God has put upon our heart to go with. Ultimately, it's a teaching and preaching ministry, not just on the issue of abortion, but on the issues that affect our daily lives. If my wife could say, I would be the social activist side of the ministry, if you want to call it that. There's social activists out there who don't have a clue who God is. But if you want to be active in social issues, as Christians should be, That's my side of the thing. My wife brings teaching on prophecy, deliverance, healing. That's my wife's desire and passion. So that's her side. Things. It was very interesting that the day before I was invited to come here, I'd never heard of Light and Life churches. And the night before I was invited here, my wife was part of a ministry team in another Light and Life church. And she says, I was in this church, Light and Life, great people. I met this pastor, Pat, and whom I still haven't met, but she had met her, my wife, and they really hit it off from what I hear. And they were chatting and everything. You were at this Light and Life church? Well, that's great. No, we got chatting about what they were doing down there. The next day I get an invite to come to a Light and Life church. And we'd never heard of them before, but all of a sudden, so we feel there's perhaps this connection. And God's moving in such a way, and that's brilliant, isn't it? So that's what we do. From within all of that, we shall not be silent was born. And the way we call it the way forward because we believe God is calling us to move in a certain direction. A certain type of teaching is needed in the church today. A certain type of a move of God is needed within the church today. No one here can sit in this room and say we are at the place we should be in the Lord. We need to keep going. We need to keep going to that particular place that the Lord wants us to be. We throw around the word revival. And has any of us actually truly seen revival on a large scale in our land? Perhaps you have, Wesley. But who has? Where God is moving, where God is impacting, where God is changing people's lives. And we're not talking about one or two, we're talking about entire cities. We're talking about bars closing down. We're talking about nightclubs running out of business. We're talking about people being changed to a certain degree where it gets the attention of the governments and of the nation. I'll take you back to Suffolk Estate, West Belfast. This is how it all started for me. 17-year-old boy, largely Protestant estate in the middle of West Belfast. God moved mightily, graciously saved me, age of 17 years of age, 29th of July, 1998. And I could be wrong about that because I was wrong and said I had 3 kids. But that's the date I believe it was. The Lord saved me. We Church of Ireland, Church St. John the Baptist. Great fellowship, great people in it. And the Lord moved upon me. The only problem was I was really shy and I couldn't speak. I certainly couldn't pray. I never prayed out loud in my life. Didn't know anything about anything. Wee guy with tracksuit, big glasses, funny hair, spots all over the face, walking about West Belfast, talking like this, Didn't know anything about anything, just going to school and mind my own business. And got saved, and things changed. The Lord started laying burdens upon my heart. And when I was 17 years of age, I left the Church of Ireland church and went to a little home church for a season. And I was coming back from the Belfast city centre back up to Suffolk. And the way you did it was you went up the Falls Road. It was a wee quick way of doing it. So you got the bus, the red bus in them days, up the Suffolk Estate. And we were sitting on the bus. I was minding my own business. Only saved a couple of weeks. And the bus was stopped because there was a lot of traffic. And there was a funeral coming the other direction. So all the traffic was slowed down. So I'm sitting there minding my own business. And coming the other direction is a funeral procession. And carrying the coffin, whoever it was had died. It was a leading Republican that died. And carrying the coffin was Martin and Jerry and a few of the other boys, I didn't know anything about them. I just knew them because we all knew the names back in them days, And they were carrying the coffins. And I'll never forget this. Martin McGuinness looked into the bus that time, just looking in my direction. He didn't look at me, he looked through me. One of them sort of things. But for that particular time in my life, the first time I ever felt God speak to me. People say when you speak to God it's called prayer, but when God speaks back it's called schizophrenia. But God does speak to his people. And I remember the Lord speaking to me deep into my heart, and he says this, Steve, you're going to make more of a difference in Northern Ireland than any politician. I didn't know anything about anything. Martin McGuinness wasn't in Stormont at the time. I'd never even prayed out loud. But God was moving. And I've had ups and downs along the journey. As my good friend Darren says, I've had more comebacks than Frank Bruno. Yeah, you know what I mean? And God has kept being gracious to me every time I've fallen. And so God put this burden upon my heart. I prayed out loud eventually, and I got on with life. And I was lying in my room some nights, 17 years old, in the Suffolk estate, and God put upon my life about abortion. Single guy, no kids. Lying in a wee council estate up in my bedroom, my mum and dad downstairs. God had put it upon my heart. I didn't communicate it at first because I didn't know how to communicate. So I just got burdened by this and other issues, but we'll talk about abortion today. And I didn't know how to communicate it. Eventually I moved on. I was a bit of a spiritual gypsy in those days, as it were, moving from church to church, whether that's a good thing or not. And I ended up in Kingsway Church, and not in Dunmurray. That's where I am today. Nearly 17 years I'm there. And we were doing some pro-life work in terms of, I was involved with the youth, and we were showing some pro-life videos. It didn't go according to plan, and it discouraged me because I didn't know how to communicate this pro-life message, so I thought I'd show some videos. And we showed the videos and so on, but it didn't go to plan. And I was coming home one night from it, and I'm married at this time, and I'm cutting a long story short, you can tell, going from 17 to being married. And I was deeply discouraged by it, and all of a sudden, I was saying, God, I'm discouraged by this. Is this what you want me to communicate? And this van drives down the road. I don't know, God shows people signs out of nowhere, and I'm not one of these guys that sees dreams and visions all the time. But this van drives down the road, and on the side of the van says, the way forward. I'd never seen it before in my life. I don't know what it was, some company. But I told Tracy about it, my wife, and we got talking about it. And then the Lord confirmed it. I was out running a couple of days later, and I was running with my headphones in, about to cross the road. And I was stopped. I had to stop because obviously I wasn't looking where I was going, and a van was going to hit me. It was the same van. A couple of days later. And I've never seen it again the rest of my life. And I knew the Lord was speaking to me. You were to call your ministry the Way Forward Ministries, because you're to go. That's the way forward. Keep going, Steve. There's something that needs to be tapped into here, which is largely untapped. So we started that. I got an opportunity to share the first time a pro-life message in a hotel in Belfast, Sandy Row, believe it or not, Days Hotel. About 50 young people turned up. I spoke for 3 hours with a break in the middle, thankfully. And it was the first time I'd ever spoken on the issues of abortion in Northern Ireland and our need as men and women. It was a largely Catholic congregation. And that was a burden to me because I knew it, not for any political reason, but the burden was that the call to make a difference in the world in which we live solely rests upon the evangelical church who know the Lord. And Roman Catholics today, and we thank them for their work, have led the way in pro-life ministry. They're the ones on the streets. They're the ones filling in the petitions. They're the ones getting lambasted. They're the ones getting criticised. They're the ones getting the finger pointed at them. But they're leading the way. One guy stands up in the meeting at the Q&A session at the end. He says, tears in his eyes, from what I remember, he says, why is the evangelical church doing nothing on the issue of abortion? It got me so burdened. I went home and told my wife more about it. She was there that day, and we went home, we discussed it, and we got talking. Let's get a conference together. We're going to organise a conference. And people say, well, a conference? Why not start in the back room somewhere? But a conference, that's a big thing. You know, who's going to be there? I don't know. Who's going to speak? Well, I'm going to speak. Who are you going to, and we didn't know anything about this particular. We're going to do a conference. We're going to get all the evangelicals together. Let's get on the campaign trail. Let's get people engaged with what we're going to do. And what we found was a shock to our system. I met with pastors and leaders as far out and wide as I could get to. I met them after work, tired at nights, just going and meeting them and having coffee and repeating the same conversation over and over again. You gotta come. A lot of people said they would come and didn't show up. A lot of people did show up. And I tell you now, a lot of people came. Over 80 people came. I remember 2 days before the conference, I was walking down to work and I says, God, I'm going to have to get in touch with the health minister here. We'd conversed a little bit. I don't know what your opinion of him is. It doesn't really matter. But the point of the matter is, I was praying, God, I need to get in touch with this guy to see if he's still coming. And I prayed, and as I opened my eyes, there he was standing on the other side of the road, about to cross the traffic lights. And I says, well, all right, this is as good as any. I went, met him in the middle of the road, shook his hand, said, Edwin, you're coming to this conference, aren't you? Oh, I'll be there. And he brought the son and Paul Given. And I was greatly blessed. Not that that means anything, but they came along. He's the head of health in this country. We largely see abortion as a health issue, though it's not. But that happened. Over 80 people came. We called the meeting, "We Shall Not Be Silent." And friends, I want to share with you this morning things. I'm not going to be long because I don't want to be so long-winded. But we called it "We Shall Not Be Silent." And why we did that was because the church is largely guilty of being silent on the issue of abortion. And my heart was so burdened because Christians are brilliant and great, and it's needed to stand up for other social needs. Sex trafficking, poverty, reaching out to the hurt and the abandoned and the lonely and the burdened. Rightly so, it should be addressed and deeply addressed. There's even Christians who will support ministries out there for premature babies. Notice how I say premature, they're already born. They'll get involved and run marathons and get involved in these groups of people who will support young children with complications who have just been born. And rightly so, get involved as much as you can. But let's rewind. Maybe a month beforehand, the baby is not premature, the baby is in the womb. No one cares. Now that's a broad brush, no one cares. Obviously there are people who care. But the very fact that there are statistics of abortion shows to me that things have been allowed to happen untouched and impeded, or is the word impeded? Or there's been no one intervening in these allowed in our land. The fact that statistics even exist. And statistics don't get you anywhere. There's no power in a statistic. But it does tell you what has gone on in the past. But we can make a difference. So there it was. Let me read to you a quote by a guy, Methodist minister called W. Sangster. Anybody heard of him? Yeah. He said, "How shall I feel at the judgment of multitudes of missed opportunities passed before me in full review, and all my excuses proved to be disguises of my cowardice and pride." That's one of my favourite quotes. It's a challenging quote. But we had to go for it. We had to get involved. We had to make our life count. See, I'm the sort of guy, if you ever get to know me, and you may do down the line, I'm the sort of guy, and my personality is just to sit at home on the sofa, eat a Chinese and watch TV, and let the world go by. But you know a lot about a person, about what keeps them awake to 3 a.m. You will find out a lot about that person. For many people, it's the bars and the clubs and the social scene and getting out and about, and they're all hungover and drunk, and they're up to that time of morning. But there are some people who are kept up to 3 a.m. because God has put a dream in their hearts. God has put a burden and a vision in them that they cannot shake. I'm lying in bed, a 17-year-old, and God said to me, "You're going to get involved in this work." I'm like, "Lord, why unborn children? I'm single. I don't have any kids of my own." But there's something about the burden of God on a certain issue. You just can't shake it. It's almost like I was driven to get involved, to speak up. I tried to be quiet, but I couldn't. I had to keep doing it. A lot of my Christian friends, for the most part in the beginning stages, couldn't support what we were doing. And that's what you find with the work of God. People that are closest to you are the ones who just don't get it. Because God's speaking to you. I suppose it's up to you to communicate that vision. But some people just don't get it. And so there's hurts and there's pains along the way. People think you're a madman. I've had numerous emails saying, simply blaming me for being a man. What do you know about this issue? You're a man, you'll never get pregnant. And so on and so forth. But God is moving. God is moving. So, what did we do after the conference? We started off big. We ended up being on American radio, being interviewed, to a degree, talking about on Dr. Michael Brown's radio show, which we discussed earlier, what we intended to do. We wanted to make the Christian church aware of what abortion was. And I remember standing up in a meeting on the Shankill Road, and I was talking. We do training seminars, I'll mention them in a second or two, but I remember standing up and I said, off the cuff remark, I've been doing this ministry now from October 2011, so it's just over 2 years now, and I've been doing this, and I moved on. The pastor of the church got up at the end of my talk and said, Steve, what you said, 2 years, that's not an insignificant thing. 2 years is an awfully long time to be focusing on abortion. See, abortion's not a nice topic. It deeply troubles the person. You know, it's a deeply troubling thing. And I would expose myself to imagery, all for the purpose of training and all for the purpose of communicating the pro-life ministry. And if you've ever seen abortion imagery, which we're not showing today, but if you've ever seen it, it is extremely graphic and extremely grotesque. But that is what's going on. See, the wrong thing to ask is, are these pictures gory? The wrong thing to ask, are these pictures bloody? That's the wrong question. The wrong question to ask is, are these pictures true? Yeah. And if they're true, we have a burden and we have an obligation to show people what is going on and what is celebrated in our land as a freedom of choice. And it doesn't make you popular to share these things. So what are we doing now? The conference went brilliant. People's hearts were changed. I even know of a guy who went out and saw the imagery and was sick. Sick. Christian guy. But people were changed and transformed. After the conference, we said, you know, what are we going to do now? So we got on. We said we're going to go around churches, and we're going to have training seminars. This is not one of the training seminars, by the way. I'm just showing you about the training seminar. And we do training seminars, and we train people how to prove the personhood of the unborn child. And it was around about this time that my good friend Liam got involved in the ministry. And Liam is presenting a portion of the talk that we do. And eventually we'll be in 2 places at different times, and we're going to go around different churches. But getting into churches to do this seminar is extremely difficult. And I'll say this with the deepest respect, people largely just don't want to know. They largely just don't want to know. And it's so boring. It's such an irrelevant subject to many, many people. But so the temptation is to be discouraged, but God is saying, you need to press on. You need to keep going. You need to keep giving yourself to this. Because eventually there will be a breakthrough. And what God revealed to us was that every ministry out there, if you think about all the ministries out there that people love to get involved in, the path has already been laid, so it's easy just to dander down it. But this ministry in Northern Ireland, rising the evangelical church up to the issue of abortion, has not been done. So the path is going to be rocky, it's going to be hard, it's going to be a lot of digging, and maybe the people who come behind you in years to come will find a bit of an easier road because of the road that you've marked for them to walk. So we've thought, God showed us it was a pioneering ministry to bring the knowledge of abortion to the church. So I have a few bits and pieces that I want to show you guys, that we give out on our training days. Maybe ask Leah, would you give these out? You can take these home with you. And these are the sorts of things that we give out at our training days. And they're called sled cards. I'm going to share with you what they are in a little second or two. People keep changing the topic on abortion. How are we for time? Okay? Yeah, sorry? As long as it's not dark outside, we're okay. People keep changing the topic on abortion. Have you ever watched Stephen Nolan discuss abortion and all the stuff around abortion? You will find that one thing that they miss out in the entire abortion discussion is the most important: the baby. Yeah. They never, ever talk about the baby. And so the topic of focus, the topic of conversation and the focus on abortion is always changed. It's always moving around. It's a smokescreen. And so it's mixed in emotions, it's mixed in motives, it's mixed in hardship, it's mixed in social issues, an issue of, the mother can't handle the child anymore. And so what we realised that all the attention is placed upon the mum and none upon the child. Now don't get me wrong, attention should be placed upon the mum. Compassion to everyone involved, that's the key. Of course it is. But all attention is placed upon the mum and why an abortion is being carried out, and no one will ever talk about the little baby that dies in an abortion. And you'll find that across the mainstream BBC, who are militantly pro-abortion in its viewpoint. I remember listening to Anna Lowe, who's an Alliance MLA in East Belfast, and she was on the Nolan show and she said something extremely daft, but extremely programmed. And this is the way everyone's thinking nowadays. And she said, if I can get it right, she says, I don't know what people are talking about. The unborn is not, it's not a baby, it's a fetus. And which was argumentative suicide. It's suicide and argument, because basically the word fetus is Latin for small child. So basically what she said is the baby's not a child, it's a small child. So she hadn't got a clue what she was talking about. But we realised the word fetus is just a stage of development of that same child. And that's what we know. So nobody wants to talk about what is the unborn. So what we realised, and Liam will tell you if you speak to him today, that the main question in the abortion debate, the only question that matters, is what is the unborn? What are we killing? What are we putting to death? If you're pro-abortion or if you're pro-life, the one thing you will agree on is that abortion kills something. If it's alive, growing, right? We're killing something. We're incinerating something. We're ripping apart something. Yeah. Now, the main issue is with the pro-abortion lobby is the fact that what they're killing is they don't see as a human being until a certain point in time. There are people out there teaching young people to claim that an unborn shouldn't be considered a person till 30 days after birth. There's people teaching that in mainstream universities nowadays. 30 days after birth. And if there's any defects in the baby after it's born, the parents should have the right to kill that baby on the spot. Come on. We're living in these days. Nobody wants to talk about what the unborn actually is. And a great analogy by a guy called Steve Schwartz is that there's only 4 differences between you and an unborn child. And they stand for size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. They're the only 4 differences that between you now and the unborn child you once were. And none of those 4 differences justify you killing an unborn child or you being killed at that earlier stage of development. And what we found this argument to be invaluable, because we were destroying arguments like this. How do we know that the only question is what is the unborn? Imagine you're at your sink and you're washing the dishes with your wife or your significant other, and you've got a 5-year-old like I do. And you're washing the dishes. You're swaying to the music with your wife. You're giving everything is in unison, and you're washing dishes. All of a sudden, your 5-year-old comes in from the back garden. Mummy, Daddy, your back's turned. Mummy, Daddy, can I kill this? With your back turned, what is the first question and the only question you can't ask? What is it? What is it? So you can't answer the question, can I kill this, without asking the predicate question, well, what is it? What have you got? If it's a worm or a beetle, go ahead, don't tell Mum. Or if it's your little brother, you might need counselling. But generally you can't ask the question, can I kill this, without asking the prior question, well, what is it? What have you got there? And that is the key in unlocking this abortion debate. But what is it? What is the unborn? And we can answer that easily. The unborn are unique and individual human beings made in the likeness of God. Made in the likeness of God. And embryology textbooks will tell you that. I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination. But embryology textbooks will tell you that. The science of embryology. And that's what nobody wants to talk about. And so we made these cards. They were first made by a guy called Steve Schwartz. And it's all about size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. And you can look at those and bring those home with you. Let me give you some statistics, because it'd be wrong for me not to give statistics to at least clue you in to what is actually going on in our United Kingdom, in Ireland as a whole. The word abortion on the FPA website, the FPA stands for Family Planning Association, or the British Pregnancy Advisory Institute or Association. They will tell you that this is the official line, abortion is the removal of an embryo or a fetus from the uterus in order to end a pregnancy. That's what they'll tell you it is. And that sounds extremely harmless, and that's the way it's made out. The word baby will not be mentioned. You'll turn up for your abortion procedure on the day, depending on what type of abortion procedure you go for, depending on how old the baby is. The word baby won't be mentioned. Any ultrasounds given, you'll not be permitted to see the baby in the womb on the ultrasound. so as not to create an emotional connection between the mother and the child. When that baby is aborted, for younger stages of development, the baby will just be chemically aborted because the baby is quite small, so it will just pass through. When the baby is older, obviously the baby starts to form bones. There's a brain, there's eyes, there's a heartbeat, of course. There's a heartbeat within 3 weeks. A heartbeat within 3 weeks. And we throw them in the bin like rubbish. One of the most gruesome, I'll share this, and it's the only act of abortion I really want to focus on in its gruesome nature, was partial birth abortion. Has anyone ever heard of partial birth abortion? And it's still legal in America, in many states. Some states have outlawed it, but it's still legal in many states in America, and especially in many parts of the world, where an abortion procedure is still legal up to all 39 to 40 weeks of pregnancy. Now that baby is live and kicking. That baby is perhaps maybe weeks away from crying its first cry. That baby's fully human. That baby's going to hurt when something is happening to him or her. And a partial birth abortion procedure is the baby is breech birthed, which means the head comes out last, so legs come out first. And with just the head left in the birth canal, the doctor or physician will then insert scissors up the back of the baby's head and remove its brain without anaesthetic. And then the baby is then tossed into a bucket, many times still alive, and squirming in the bucket. Many nurses have tried to intervene at that time and say, that baby's still alive, that fetus is still alive, that non-human's still alive. But they're not permitted to intervene. They have to let the baby die because it goes against the original wishes of the mum. And then there could be lawsuits and all sorts of legality issues. So babies are left to die. Babies are tossed down toilets. You've heard this in the news. Babies, unwanted children, just thrown in toilets. One baby was found alive, stuck in a toilet in the pipes in China, if you remember the story. This is the way we discard of human life. And we look at the United Kingdom, and I say this with the greatest respect. We look at the United Kingdom today, we look at Ireland today, and there's nothing wrong with being patriotic. There's nothing wrong with enjoying certain times of the year for your culture, if your culture is what you live for, and it shouldn't be, if we're Christians. But if it is your culture, there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to like your flag. It's okay to do this or to do that. But the point of the matter is, when we have rivers of blood flowing underneath our streets and flowing from our hospitals, how can we celebrate in our own country? How can we love our country to a degree where we ignore that is happening in our lands and we do nothing about it as believers? And I know that Christians are meant to be the moral compass of society. If that compass is broken, people have no idea what right and wrong is. They don't know where to go. If that light, that we know we're the light on the hill, we're not a bunch of lights of all different shapes and sizes. There's only one light, and that's us. And if that light is covered, remember the word says, do not cover your light on a lampstand. Do not cover it. But we're covering it, so people don't have a clue where we are. And so we just camouflage into society, and we just let the world go to hell. At large. Oh, Steve, you're painting with too broad a brush. No, I don't think so. The evidence that we have done little to nothing is the fact the statistics exist in the first place. Well, what statistics are you talking about? Well, here, last year alone, upwards of 190,000 babies were murdered in the UK alone. 190,000. 51 babies were aborted in Northern Ireland last year on the grounds for medical issues. 1,000 people, upwards of 1,000 people travel from Ireland to the UK and abroad to kill their own child. And we look at those statistics, and they may not mean much to people, but we think about the millions and millions and millions of children that die every single year according to abortion. How many people do you think die every year worldwide in abortions? How many children? Anybody have a figure? This will never be on the news. It will never be reported by Christians at large. I've been in the church for 16, 17 years. And I say this with deep respect. I have never heard a preaching on abortion until I did it myself. That's not to big me up, but that's to say that the people of God are missing the point. That we are made in the image of God, and yet we stand by whilst those image bearers are destroyed. It's not my problem. It's what people think. You know what the figure is yearly? How many babies die every year in abortion? 93 million. Give or take. But then how do you give or take that sort of figure? Worldwide. I could be corrected on that to the exact degree, but that's what we're led to believe. So like I said, I'm going to finish in a second or two, but Christians are good to stand up for moral issues. But we need to do so much more. Let me quote a guy called Nate Saint. He says this. And people who do not know the Lord ask why in the world we waste our lives as missionaries. They forget that they too are expending their lives, and when the bubble has burst, they will have nothing of eternal significance to show for the years that they have wasted. If I could encourage you at the end of this talk, and in our training seminars, if I ever get the privilege of perhaps sharing it with you sometime, we go into all these things in a greater and deeper way. If I can encourage you to be sold out for something, sold out for the cause, do something. Be a voice. Be a voice. We are guilty of silence, not on the issue of abortion, but on the issue of many things. And we know that abortion, and we know other things that are prominent in Northern Ireland, are attacks on the family as God intended them to be. But before you get a voice, before you be a voice, I pray to God for a burden, first of all. Don't just be a clanging cymbal throwing your voice around. Get a burden, get a heart, get compassion. There are many hurting people out there going to kill their children. And one of the greatest arguments that I ever heard on the issue of rape, which is used as justification, and rightly so. There's a lot of hurt involved in a woman who's been raped, who feels the only way out is to abort the child, and it's a big question. It's a big thing to point out. But one of the greatest arguments I ever heard on that was that to kill the child due to rape doesn't unrape the woman. It just makes them the mother of a dead child. It doesn't unrape them. It doesn't take away the problem. And there are so many people burdened by these and with these issues in Northern Ireland today. And there are people sitting in pews all over the land who are secretly having abortions. And there are people sitting in pews who've been affected by abortion, and no one has ever addressed it. Sure, pornography is mentioned now and again. Addiction to drink is mentioned now and again. Gambling, whatever the addictions are, shame and depression and so on. But no one ever seems to mention the shame of abortion, because it is a shame. One woman came up to my wife one time and said, as a result of our conference, and thanked her and said, I haven't never heard a teaching on abortion before, but I feel really set free. I helped a friend of mine have 2 abortions, or maybe it was her sister, have 2 abortions. The shame I felt for years, I felt released after this conference. The teaching is needed today to be a voice. So I'll just finish with a prayer. And then I thank you so much for listening to me. Lord, I thank you for your blessings. I thank you for your mercy and your grace. Lord, I just ask, God, that you would stir our hearts once more, Lord. Mine included, Lord. I pray, God, you would give us a heart of compassion, Lord. You would break down our hearts of stone, Lord. I pray, God, that you would cause us, Lord, to be burdened by the things that burden you, Lord.
Yeah.
Lord, to quote Leonard Ravenhill, are the things we are living for worth Christ dying for? And Lord God, I just ask, God, that you would burn deeply in our hearts this day. Cause us to think about this communication